All right, everyone, welcome back into another NFL props video. We've been touching on the top prop bets for the Monday night showdown between the Chargers and the Jets. But first, as always, let's do a recap of yesterday. So looking at the recap from yesterday, just going to show you guys the tweet. This was one of the slips that I kind of recommended as a very good bet throughout the day yesterday. And then another slip that we had, which was one that ended up hitting. And then I'll show you guys another one that was a variation off of this one. And I realize now that I messed this up in the earlier video. This was the Sunday night football slip that we had out there. The only one that missed was Micah Hyde. We did see him get that, kind of back of the head, slight injury. He was able to come back, but obviously that didn't help still. Yesterday we saw with this slip specifically that it was a day in which we had really good prop bets. You guys could tell I was super excited about the slip we were able to put out there because it correlated heavily. And we saw that was true. They end up hitting, and we love that. So hopefully we can do that again for you guys today. And before I get into the game preview, I do want to start out with two good EV bets that we currently have. As always, I like to show you guys these in case that they are still there. Actually, we have three. So we got Justin Herbert for over pass completions, Parham, and I did need to update that because it just refreshed. So it's 24 for Justin Herbert there. We are seeing Zach Wilson for over 13 for a fantasy score as a seemingly good one as well. And I'll break all these down. I just wanted to show you guys we had some pretty good EV bets to kind of start the video. As always, I like to give you guys at the start just in case they get bumped. By the time you guys get to the end of the video, these can get a little bit long. I like to break them down as much as I see fit. So let's go ahead and get into kind of the breakdown of this game. We got the Jets versus the Chargers. 3.5 point spread. Okay, the game over and under is set at 40, so interesting game in that regard. We're going to see both teams are kind of banged up, but not really in terms of like significant fantasy producers. For the Chargers, I guess, obviously they're without Mike Williams, and they're going to be without Josh Palmer. He went on the IR. So with that, I think we're going to find that Davis is going to be their receiver number 3, but we're going to see Quintez Johnston really step up into a bigger role. And I do want to point out Gerald Everett is going to be back in this game. So Parham Jr., who was someone in their last game, we expected to step up in that role, and that's exactly what happened. I do want to note, with Josh Palmer out, I do think we are going to see the receptions go to Austin Eckler. And so let's start out with the Chargers there and Austin Eckler specifically. We saw him get used in the passing game heavily. And what did I kind of call out in the last video? It's that when Keenan Allen's been healthy, we really haven't seen Austin Eckler be used as much in the passing game as people would typically expect. But I did think with Josh Palmer being kind of banged up and he was in and out of that game, that Austin Eckler would be someone that would benefit the most from that. So I do think we are going to see him pretty heavily involved in the passing game. And so we go into the props. They corrected it, I think. We'll show you guys it though. Austin Eckler for over 34.5 receiving yards is still one that I don't mind. Now, you can get it at 32.5 on Underdog. I think that that's going to be the better approach to go with, but I do think he's going to be involved in the passing game. And I'm curious, are we getting any receptions props on him just yet? We are not. That's annoying. Part of the reason why I didn't come out with this video last night was the fact that we were not getting any good props for them just yet. Like, it was a very limited board, and we are getting some more. Like, I actually don't mind Austin Eckler for over his fantasy score, but we're not going to see that as one that's popping up. Now, we are seeing Justin Herbert for over his pass completions at 24. Let's take a peek at that one. So the Jets are typically a team that are a little bit more difficult to rush the football against. So I do think they are probably going to throw the football a little bit more. And I do think we're going to see kind of some simple route trees for this team where it's going to be easy completions. Keenan Allen in the short game, Austin Eckler in the short game. Really, they don't have too much down the field threats. Now, Jalen Guyton, I believe, was activated from the IR. I don't know if he's playing or not. Let's actually look that up. Currently questionable. Yeah, I don't think he's going to play. He is a decent downfield threat, and I think they could use Davis in that regard as well. But I think we're going to see a lot of easy passes to not only Austin Eckler, probably Quintez Johnston, and also Keenan Allen, but also Gerald Everett. So that low of a line for Justin Herbert, 24, is seemingly a good one. And it's weird, they haven't really been able to rush the football with Austin Eckler since he's been back. So I do think that there's something there to that as well. Obviously, if we're going with Herbert for over that, we probably want to do maybe Keenan Allen for over his receptions. But what I find weird, and I want to look at receptions in general here, is that the data doesn't really like Quintez Johnston for over. Now they're saying it's basically a push, and Gerald Everett they don't like for over. Those were two that, I said we had a limited board yesterday. Those were two to me that kind of stood out as profits that we'd probably want to go in on. And so we take a peek at the snaps from last week. We're going to see Johnston played in 70%. We're probably going to expect that number to go up to like 80, this week. In terms of tight end snaps, I think we could still see Parham Jr. play a bunch of snaps. We saw Stone Smart play a bunch of snaps in that game. And so, yes, Gerald Everett is going to be the starting tight end. I do think he's probably going to play about 70, and then probably Parham Jr. is going to play about 50 or so. He actually might be there. They might do a lot of 12 personnel, and we're probably going to see them get unique. Heck, we might see Eckler and Josh Kelly on the field together as well. I think that this is going to be kind of a weird game in that sense. Simi Fioco as well. He was someone that I've always kind of liked. He's a pretty good talent. Now, yes, he's like a receiver 4 type, but he's a solid receiver 4. So I could see him getting more work as well. So it's super interesting to try to gauge what they're going to do. But we know for sure it's going to be Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Johnston, probably Parham Jr. and Gerald Everett. And then from there, we don't exactly know what to expect. So I don't know. To me, the lines that we're getting on Johnston are really low. He had 6 targets in the last game. And they made an emphasis on getting him the football in that game. And then also Jared Everett, looking at him, I think he is going to be involved in the passing game. Freaking Justin Herbert loves this guy. And now you take away Mike Evans and also Palmer to his sample size. I think there's a good chance he gets to 3 receptions, but I don't think he gets over there. I think Johnston's the better bet. But I want to point out Johnston's going to be a better bet for that on one of the sports books. Now, the sports books some of them are giving it at 3.5 receptions, but they're favoring the under there. So this is seemingly a slight edge we have there, but not a big one. And then just getting back into all the Chargers props that we have, probably not much there, right? Like just yet. And so if we're doing the pass completions, we got to find some sort of correlation. I do think Keenan Allen for over 6.5 receptions is fine. The Jets defense is tough. We know that. But maybe we're going with Austin Eckler over his receiving yards. Again, that's a better line on Underdog. It's kind of a weird way to get exposure to two bets that correlate, but on a different site. So we'll go ahead and get to the Jets now. Let's see here. Yeah. Zach Wilson for over fantasy score. That's probably going to make people cringe a little bit seeing that pop up, but we can see the average sportsbook line would be favoring the under, but at 16. The projection data likes him to get 13.9, and the Underdog has the line set at 14. So if you guys think this is a terrible one, yeah, bet the under there on Underdog. But when we look at DVP for opposing quarterbacks, yeah, this is the best matchup that you can get. Quarterbacks are averaging 27.7 fantasy points per 36, and we can use DraftKings scoring. It's a little bit different because they give like 100-yard bonuses or 300-yard bonuses and whatnot, but not too bad. So about 24.5. So we'll take a peek at Zach Wilson here. He's kind of been averaging around there, 12.2. And when I say there, I meant the over 13. You tack on the fact that this is a very plus matchup for him. He should be able to get the over there. And that really depends on if they can get Garrett Wilson going. But also, it sounds weird, Tyler Conklin going as well. That's one of his favorite targets. I will say, and this still makes me mad, that game against the Giants, one of his touchdowns was to Breece Hall. And I say that because he was chalking DFS that week. And I'm like, he's a pretty easy fade. People got bailed out by that because he got a long touchdown on some terrible tackling. It was one big play. Now, thankfully, the bad chalk this week in NFL DFS didn't pay off. But all in all, Zach Wilson against the Chargers here, this should be a good one. And he is someone that I don't want to say he's looked good, but, it's kind of like with CJ Stroud at the start of the season where, early on after week 1, I'm like, he looked pretty sharp, actually. Like, he didn't look as bad as he did in the preseason. I'm like, he looked pretty sharp. We have kind of seen that with Zach Wilson. And, going back to that game against KC, I was saying those same things going into that game. I'm like, he hasn't looked bad. He's actually looked kind of sharp. And in that game, he outplayed Patrick Mahomes. Now, since he hasn't really lit it up, but that's because they have been able to rush the football with Breece Hall. And they probably will be able to do that in this game. But at the same time, the weakness for this team is throwing the football. So I do expect Zach Wilson to have a good game in this game. Just don't have a bunch of turnovers. You had 2 turnovers in that last game. Can't have that. Let's get some rushing yards. And so I will use this one just because it is one that stands out as the best bet really on the board today. Let me see Breece Hall for over his receiving yards. Let's take a peek at that. So Breece Hall is someone that is getting used a lot in the passing game. We see that. We take a peek at like DVP as well. Like the Chargers are giving up some of the most passing yards to opposing running backs. We see 9 games for the Bears and Bills, which is a lot. But then we see 8 games here. So like the Chargers are probably the 3rd worst or maybe even 2nd worst in terms of receiving yards given up to opposing running backs. And then if we take a peek at Breece Hall's snap counts, they're probably going to be capped at maybe 70 or so. But we're going to see that is a pretty nice snap share that he's been getting recently. And so, yeah, I think both of those kind of correlate there. Zach Wilson for over his, and then also fantasy score, and then also Breece Hall for over his receiving yards. Those are 2 pretty good ones. I agree with those. Tyler Conklin for over 6 for a fantasy score is a good one. Let's see if he still has his receptions prop at 2.5 though. And he does. So it's tough to say which one I like the most here. We do see the data saying fantasy score a little bit more there for Tyler Conklin. And I think it can go either way, like whichever one you want to end up on, I'm fine with. We'll point out his snap counts, guys. They've been at around 70. And the thing with it is, with Zach Wilson at quarterback, Tyler Conklin has been a top 10 fantasy tight end. Now, I do want to point out, in the last game against the Giants, the game you could tell was very much both teams just wanted to rush the football. Okay, that was what was going on. It was really bad film to watch because it was just, let's establish the run and win that way. I don't think that's what's going to occur this game. I think they're going to have to pass, and just be careful, guys, because, you know, we're PrizePicks is PrizePicks in there. But basically every other game, he's been able to get over 3 receptions. And so to me, that's an appealing one. But if you want to go with the over fantasy score, like the data's saying, I would say that correlates pretty well with Zach Wilson as well. So not a terrible one we can roll with there. From there, yeah, I don't know if we want to be using any of these other ones. They're all pretty low. I will say Garrett Wilson was someone I wanted to get to. I would say, like, we see a big prop line difference here. Like, Underdog is heavily saying that Garrett Wilson is going to have a good game. And we can see that this line is probably low compared to what the sportsbook thinks and what the projection data thinks as well. The annoying part with Garrett Wilson is that there have been a few games where he has been an afterthought and you're just like, what's going on? And that has gotten corrected the next game. And so, like, look at those targets. Those targets are crazy, right? Like, it's tough for me to imagine him not having a good game in this game, especially if Zach Wilson is going to get over his fantasy score. So to me, the night that we have right now on paper is definitely not as good as the night that we had yesterday. But at the same time, I would say the bets that I kind of like correlate better than last night. And so let's go ahead and show you guys the bet of the day. I guess real quickly, I want to show you guys some PrizePicks props that we have there for NBA. So we got a bunch of pretty good bets right now for NBA. Zach LaVine for over rebounds and assists, a 58% chance to hit. Daniel Gafford 21 for the fantasy score. I don't like that one personally. I think it's a tough matchup for him. I don't want to touch that. Drew Holiday under assist. I don't really like that as well, but we do see Brandon Ingram for over fantasy score. That's one that I like. Player that I was kind of high on for today, given the matchup that he has, was Brook Lopez for over his fantasy score. That's a pretty decent one, but we can see PrizePicks is accounting for that being a good matchup as well. So not too many legs there, but, you know, decent if you want to use those instead of the prop bets I'm going to recommend here for the bet of the day. And then just real quickly showing you guys some underdog props, kind of what they're seeing. And so, yes, we did see that Underdog was valuing his production a little bit more than PrizePicks. And so basically, if you think Zach Wilson is going to struggle, that would be a bet that you could roll with there. And then from there, not too many good ones. We are still seeing that Austin Eckler bet is fine. And to me, guys, let's just, I don't want to hedge like this, but let's do it. Garrett Wilson under fantasy score, and then Austin Eckler for over receiving yards there for Underdog. That's what I like. Now I'll show you guys the PrizePicks bet of the day. All right, so looking at the bet of the day that we have here, guys, I'm going to go with Zach Wilson for over fantasy score. And because I'm doing that, I am going to go with Tyler Conklin for over his fantasy score as well. Those should correlate, but then I'm also going to pair that with Breece Hall for over his receiving yards. I think that will correlate as well. Okay, Breece Hall has been heavily involved in the passing game. We see that the Chargers are pretty bad at stopping the pass against opposing running backs. He's playing about 65% of the snaps. To me, that's a very good bet. This is probably seemingly the best bet that we have available on the board. Now, then we do see Justin Herbert, stat-wise, this is the best bet that we have available on the board, not using like fantasy score. He's got about a 55% chance to get the over here. Yes, against the Jets, it's going to be a more difficult matchup, it seems like, but at the same time, I don't know. Like, they've had a little bit, at least last week, a pretty easy game, and I feel like their day is being a little bit skewed by that a little bit. But because Vegas is saying that that's a good bet, then I would want to go with Keenan Allen for over 6.5 receptions. You could just toss in Quintez Johnston for over 3 receptions. I think that's just as safe, but you also could replace the Austin Eckler prop for over 34.5 receiving yards there as well. I do think he's going to be more involved with Mike Williams and Josh Palmer not there. Okay, but to me, these two are the most difficult on the slate because you could replace Keenan Allen with Garrett Wilson for over fantasy score. You could replace Austin Eckler with Quintez Johnston for over 3 receptions instead. Okay, that's kind of the make or break point to me, and that's where tonight is definitely not as appealing as last night, where last night it was very much like straightforward the prop bets we should be on. But tonight is kind of nice in the sense that we can make some pretty good correlated prop bets. So like, for instance, here's another one in which if Zach Wilson gets more fantasy score, we can include Garrett Wilson in there with the Tyler Conklin one. And then here's another one that would correlate pretty well with both. Like, we're including the Garrett Wilson, Tyler Conklin one, and then we're using the pass completions prop with his pass catchers, right? And I'm very curious as to where the Austin Eckler one's going to come out to be, because if that's at like 4 or 4.5, I probably would bet the over. And then Breece Hall with the Zach Wilson prop, that does make sense as well. That's going to be all for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to hit that notification bell so that when I do start the video with some good EV bets, you guys don't miss out on it. Hit the thumbs up as well. If you guys want access to the tool that you saw available in this video, it is available at 9to5sports.com for just $10 a month. All right, thanks for watching. Let's have a good slate. And as always, guys, let's keep cashing.